Do you feel like, again, thinking not only your experience at 3M, but actually also Cargill, Land O'Lakes, is marketing a single set of rules that can apply to all products? Or is it more a customized art where context is everything and you almost have to forget what you know as you move around?
It's many frameworks. And I think a lot of marketing people, you know, we've seen prime examples of that currently in the marketplace, is that marketing used to be, hey, we're just going to focus on the 4 Ps. We're going to build out our brand house. We're going to have this value statement. We're going to build out this path to purchase, blah, 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 blah. The problem that I see with a lot of that is that it doesn't take into account channel as much as it should. It doesn't take into account specific customers and Amazon is different than Walmart, that's different than Target, that's different than Home Depot and Lowe's. A lot of times somebody will just say, oh, it's the hardware channel. It's all the same. No, it's not all the same.
Welcome back to Generation Influence, a podcast focusing on the movers and shakers working behind the scenes in influencer marketing and e-commerce. I'm your host, Bill Hildebolt, one of the co-founders of gen.video, a leading platform in the influencer marketing space focused on advanced analytics and e-commerce outcomes. Today's guest is Scott Erickson, a global brand manager with experience at 3M, Cargill and Land O'Lakes, three leading heartland industrial and CPG leaders. Scott, tell us a bit about your background and career journey.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been a wide variety of opportunities and learnings over the years. I mean, like you said, three diverse companies, but all three CPG leaders between 3M. Most people aren't familiar with Cargill, but Cargill is actually the world's largest privately held corporation, primarily in the food business. Had a lot of different experiences working with CPGs and their food ingredient space, from Coca-Cola to General Mills to Kraft to McDonald's, a wide variety of those types of companies. And then Land O'Lakes, obviously the iconic butter product that everybody knows that sits on their table at every single place that they do, especially during the holidays. So a variety of sales and marketing roles, and been able to learn a lot of different things along the way.
Well, it's fun to have somebody who's got so much experience, and I'm particularly excited about Cargill and Land O'Lakes kind of sitting in this world between e-commerce and brick and mortar. Food has had a very interesting transition into the e-commerce world, and so hopefully we'll get to touch a little bit on that as we go through this. We know you, gen.video, that is, from some of your experience at 3M, working with Amazon, and so I want to start there. Amazon used to have these pop-up stores, and they shuttered them along with all of their physical bookstores around March of 2022. And that was disappointing to me, not only because gen.video was supporting the pop-ups, but because I've long been a believer in the future of physical retail as showrooming, that this idea that people would still go to these physical spaces to experience and touch products and learn about products in a very, not even necessarily looking to complete a purchase in the moment, but just to experience products to inform purchase behaviors down the line, that it would become part of this wonderful product research experience that has changed so much with the advent of e-commerce. And so it was disappointing to me to see that felt a bit like a failure and a step backwards. I know you guys experimented with the format at 3M, and so I'd love to know what was that like? What did you guys learn? Were you disappointed with the outcomes? Did you feel like you got value out of it? Just tell us about that as we think about where does physical experiences like that go in the future.
The big thing around the pop-ups and what we looked at for the pop-ups is that from a 3M perspective, a lot of people would know 3M from Post-it notes or command hooks or Filtrete or blue tape. But a lot of times people wouldn't necessarily put all those things together along with the iconic Ace bandage or NextCare brand bandages or those types of products. So what we use the pop-up store for was really an experiment around how do we get the people that are core consumers of maybe one 3M brand or a couple 3M brands to understand the full breadth of all the 3M brands and maybe be able to build that basket of products. And so we used the pop-up stores, and when we created the pop-up stores, we took over the entire store and we created like four different areas. We created like an office space where we'd showcase kind of the products that go in the office. We created a garage space that would showcase kind of the garage DIY space. We created a kitchen home space for those products, and then kind of a health and product space. And so we kind of created it that way for people to understand that 3M basically is always within 10 feet of you wherever you are in your home, and use gen.video to kind of highlight it from a standpoint of showcasing the product and the pop-up stores and things like that. And I don't think, from a physical result, kind of going back to what you said, we didn't sell a whole lot of product in the pop-up stores. I don't exactly remember how much it was, but it did create an opportunity for us to understand the basket building opportunity, not only in a physical standpoint, but online. And so what we did online, and we took it from there, is then we started experimenting with programs on Amazon around like a buy X get Y promotion. So buy $75 worth of 3M products, get a discount. Buy $100, get a bigger discount. And that would allow people to buy, hey, I'm buying a furnace filter that's already $50. Maybe I'll buy some blue tape because I'll have a product, or back to school's coming up, I'll add on some command hooks or some post-it notes, or maybe I need some sponges. So we looked at it as kind of a test and learn around how do we do basket building across disparate brands where people might not be aware of what they're trying to do. And so that's, again, kind of how I look at physical stores. You can't even look at it when you're at a Best Buy. You have the different stores kind of set up in a physical space, but how do you get people to understand how those all kind of connect between, hey, I'm looking at LG TVs, but I'm looking at Sonos sound bars, or those types of things. So again, understanding how physical also blends into e-commerce is, I think, is, and back and forth, is very important.
You, as you were going through it, I was fascinated by the fact that you brought it back to the e-commerce environment, and I really started thinking like, so the showrooming, the right way to almost think about that, it's more like an ad buy than it is this physical sales opportunity, which I think is interesting. And I wonder if Amazon had it in that bucket, or they were truly trying to make the physical stores themselves ROI positive, right? Because I had put them in the innovation bucket, and an innovation bucket that probably was going to take a number of years to play out. And so it just would be fascinating to understand what they thought.
Mhm.
We're never going to get there, or this is just too an expensive experiment, particularly as as we're coming out the back end of COVID. It'll also be interesting to see how showrooming responds in a world of VR and AR, right? Does that actually enhance the showroom opportunity, or does it do away with it, right? So if it's AR, maybe showrooming can be even more powerful, but if it's true VR, maybe showrooming isn't even necessary, that we feel like we've had a physical experience, even though it's a completely digital experience. I don't know if you've thought much about the VR and AR space, but or can relate any of that back to what you guys did. But any thoughts there?
Yeah, we were looking a little bit at AR to kind of help people understand different things around very basic type of stuff around just how do people position things in their rooms. One of the things that we were thinking about is, can if somebody took a picture of a room that they were painting or doing some work on, could it calculate out like how many rolls of painter's tape would they need?
Oh, wow.
So you start thinking about AR as kind of a tool like, oh, well, it helps you understand what you're trying to buy.
Mhm.
Even for things, because I think a lot of AR you look at as saying, oh, does this chair look good or this couch look good? But AR could also be used in ways of measurement or different aspects of kind of that purchase path.
That's great. Yeah, that it brings and bringing real utility, right? Because our instinct in those situations is just to overbuy like crazy, which
Yeah,
is wasteful. And so, right, so there would definitely be some loyalty to a brand that's like, yeah, we're not trying to do that. We're trying to deliver a service, deliver it to you efficiently, deliver you what you need. And so, so I love that angle. And let's talk a little bit more about 3M. So 3M is a
hmm
fascinating company. And so while I am definitely a believer in this idea of showrooming, although I've had that idea for a long time and it is outside of a Best Buy, I love that you use that example because to me that's the classic opportunity for showrooming is with a Best Buy where you can create these like experiences to experience the sound and the setup that you want. Um, One of the things I'm a less of a believer in is massively horizontally diversified conglomerates.
hmm
And 3M's product portfolio is absolutely vast. And arguably, they are proving me entirely wrong that it can't hang together. And so, my limited understanding of 3M is that the glue, pun fully
hmm
intended, is this commitment to R&D and innovation, which I 100% celebrate. Like that's awesome. That's what moves the world forward. But I honestly don't get how it works. And so, can you tell us more? Like, what's the secret to 3M to its vast portfolio, its longevity, the fact that it's never broken itself up, to my knowledge, or spun a lot of things off? Like, how does it all hang together?
Yeah, well, right now 3M's going through a lot of changes and a lot of adjustments, just like a lot of, let's just say even like GE a few years ago and trying to figure itself out because it is a big one. They have announced that they are actually spinning off their medical division
Hmm.
this fall or early spring. I'm not exactly sure exactly when that is. It's out there in the public domain, obviously because that is kind of a separate organization from itself. It's kind of, it's a different, serving a medical or dental environment is a different thing than kind of the rest of the consumer business that people know 3M for, or the other industrial stuff that 3M does that puts things in their automobiles or their phones or their computers or TVs and things like that. I think what it really comes down to is trying to really understand how a product is used and or how a product can be created. I mean, you really look at from a 3M consumer business, most of the products came out of an industrial application. Post-it notes is just a really light adhesive on paper that was used, and everybody knows the story that it was used by a scientist to help in their church hymnal, keep things separated out and learn that hey this is kind of a good product that people could use. You look at the various types of tape and adhesive, kind of going back to the glue. We have glues that can put airplanes together,
Mm.
and we have the same glue that just goes all the way down to post-it notes, or going back to medical, can be used on delicate skin for diabetics. So adhesive technologies can be used in a wide variety of areas. So really 3M has a kind of a 3M periodic table that's like 43 key technologies that can be used by any part of the company because it's not owned by a certain division or a certain group or a certain anything. And so anybody can use part of those technologies to help develop something new. And so I think that's kind of the unique secret sauce of the whole thing is that from a corporate R&D standpoint, there's no brick walls or secretive society of knowledge that's kept from anybody else.
That's awesome. And I'm curious in a world where competition, the commodification of things, let's say, I think is on the rise, right? And so brand is getting tougher and tougher to maintain, which then, to my mind, naturally puts pressure on the ability to invest in R&D, right? Because if you don't have this sort of brand umbrella that allows you to do premium pricing, right, where do you find the dollars to put into new innovation and R&D. Um, that's one of the scary things about, again, a world where everybody's kind of undercutting each other and everything is about price competition. When 3M looks at that world, in your mind, do they say, no, actually, we're beyond that. Like we've got our brand power, we've got our scale. We're known for our innovation. People will continue to pay a premium. That is going to mean that we can do R&D that nobody else can do and protect us. Or was that a continuous fear that, okay, we're making better products than anybody else, but if we're going to get undercut with people using slightly cheaper, technology, maybe creating slightly less quality goods, but they're going to win because they can undercut us on price, and price is what matters at an Amazon or a Walmart when the consumer is making a decision. How do we survive in that world? Which is 3M's internal sense of itself?
Obviously you have to have a good portion of your dedicated budget towards your R&D. But also you have to have the ability to say, hey, you know what, is this a market that we're going to win? So having a rigorous stage gate type of process of saying, hey, you know what, this is innovation, this is cool. Can we make any money at it? You don't keep down a path if you can't differentiate at the end. I think, really from in the consumer side of 3M, I think we've been very fortunate that we have the ability with our partners, whether it's Amazon's or the Walmarts or Targets or those types of people, to be able to help them make money on the products that we develop, more so than maybe the private labels or the less expensive products.
Mm-hmm.
Because people will come for those brands. People will look for Filtrete. Command is Command. It's a category that's been created by 3M. Posted is a category created by 3M. Yes, there are cheaper knockoff versions of things, but the consumer now knows those are in existence and there's really no good alternative at this time. So, I think, there's always going to be people that will buy the cheap stuff. Kind of going back to, when I was at Cargill, we did a lot of surveys around people when they were looking at when there was a big concern about high fructose corn syrup. And I think people are still somewhat concerned about high fructose corn syrup, which, by the way, high fructose corn syrup is just a different type of sugar. Sugar is sugar, calories in, calories out. But that's a whole different podcast. But we did some research, and one of the things that we found is that there's a portion of people that are always very concerned about nutrition, but they're typically buying fruits, vegetables. They're buying the outside part of the grocery store. They're not buying the inside part where high fructose corn syrup is.
Mm.
But they're the ones that have an opinion about high fructose corn syrup, but they're never buying the product that actually would contain it. Then there's people that are somewhat concerned and they're buying somewhat in there, but at the same time, they're concerned about taste and all those other things. And then unfortunately, and I think it's even growing due to this economic cycle that we're in, where people are basically, we have X number of dollars to feed the family for a month. We got to buy food. And sometimes you have to buy cheap calories one way or the other. And so, that's the hard part, I think, facing a lot of whether it's 3M or branded food companies or any branded company right now, is that is your product brand promise vital for whatever thing needs to be solved? If it isn't, then a cheap alternative from someplace is probably going to win some portion of your consumer base.
I love the comment. High fructose corn syrup is a podcast in and of itself. My dad was a food scientist who worked at Campbell Soup, and
Okay.
so I sat around the dinner table talking about high fructose corn syrup and GMOs and all
Yep.
those fun topics, for
Yep.
years. I also love the framework, the rubric there that pick where you can win. That calls to mind the mantra of another great heartland CPG company, P&G. We're going to be number
Mm-hmm.
one, or we're going to be number two, or we're not going to be in the market. And that is the pathway to a lot of success, right? So pick the battles. You can pick a lot of battles. Pick the ones you can win. makes a ton of
Yeah.
sense to me.
I
So,
mean, sitting in whether no matter what company I was sitting at, I mean, lots of great ideas would come up. I mean, scientists have great ideas. It's up to the business to decide, hey, is there a viable path to profitability or long-term growth for that product? I mean, sometimes you have to invest for years to be able to build out a category. I mean, 3M invested for years in Command to get that category to where it's at, because before Command existed, I mean, there was a lot of marketing that had to be invested to get consumers to understand how to use a command strip or a command hook. But the long-term investment paid off, and I think that's the hard part now too, is that it's very hard for companies to make a commitment to a product for multiple years before seeing the end goal.
yeah, it's funny. Yeah, yeah. Because now I mean, who could live without command hooks at this point, right? How many,
Hmm.
how many walls have been saved by command
Yeah.
in the
And
last
it
20
is,
years?
and as we get towards the back to school season, it's funny because you'll see the state of Massachusetts will all of a sudden become the biggest user of command hooks because of all the college dorms that have to be, decorated over, compared to the rest of the country.
Absolutely, so true. The incoming delusion students is on their way, and actually, that's a great segue into something else I wanted to talk to you about. And I want to keep pushing down this path. Do you feel like, again, thinking not only your experience at 3M, but actually also Cargill, Land O'Lakes, is marketing a single set of rules that can apply to all products? Or is it more a customized art where context is everything and you almost have to forget what you know as you move around? So give us some examples maybe to help us understand your answer, because this is the other part where I struggle, with the horizontal conglomerate is I feel like you've got to change your execution, so much as you move from category to category that, within a single organization, they're trying to push through. This is how you do it. This is how you do marketing. That's a recipe for failure, not success. But again, you're the guy
Hmm.
who sat in all these different roles and seats. Is it one framework or is it many frameworks?
I think the it's many frameworks, and I think a lot of marketing people, you know, we've seen prime examples of that currently in the marketplace, is that marketing used to be, hey, we're just going to focus on the four P's. We're going to build out our brand house. We're going to have this value statement. We're going to build out this path to purchase, blah, 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 blah. The problem that I see with a lot of that is that it doesn't take into account channel as much as it should. It doesn't take into account specific customers, and Amazon is different than Walmart, that's different than Target, that's different than Home Depot and Lowe's. A lot of times somebody will just say, oh, it's the hardware channel. It's all the same. No, it's not all the same. So I think not understanding your current customer, but I also think there's not enough time spent between the sales and marketing organizations to really have a conversation around how to grow sales. Because yes, there are things that marketing can do to help grow sales. There are things that sales leaders do to grow sales, from getting those end caps, getting those displays, understanding. Because again, I think a lot of times we're seeing a society now where the lower part of the funnel is more important than the top part of the funnel.
Mm-hmm.
It's this, going back to the influencers. It's the influencers, it's the Instagram, it's the TikToks. You know, that now is becoming more of the top of the funnel, and they're the ones immediately influencing the bottom of the funnel.
Yep.
And Amazon ads is influencing the medium to the bottom of the funnel. There are very few brands that can afford to be at the top of the funnel anymore in any significant way, because the reach and frequency for top of the funnel advertising is prohibitive to a lot of brands that you especially see on Amazon.
Yep.
So you have to basically, so we were very fortunate at 3M. I think, uh, you know I'm not sure if it was a conscious decision or if it was an unconscious decision, but we, as an account team for on Amazon, we maintained control of all the ad spending. So we
Top
worked
to
with
bottom.
top to bottom.
Yep.
So, so when decisions like, hey, we got to cut fourth quarter ad spend, instead of somebody in the brand side saying, hey, okay, we're going to cut Amazon advertising, we're going to, keep our TV, we weren't, we weren't having those same type of discussions because the money that we had in our budget was based on, hey, are we growing sales? If we're growing sales, the money exists in the budget. And that way we had the funding necessary to be successful on the platform. Too many brands now, I think they leave the e-commerce budget or the Instagram budget, or not the Instagram, the Instacart budget, or all those other budgets are controlled by a brand person that has, and not good or bad, but they have different metrics.
Yeah.
They have metrics around ROI or ROAS or those types of things. But that doesn't necessarily, having a bad ROI for a campaign might be the right thing from a sales standpoint to preserve your space.
Yep.
Because if you're getting an ROI of, somebody might say, hey, look, I'm getting an ROI of 9. Well, you're seeding, page 1 on Amazon to your competitors because you're more concerned about that ROI. So that's why I think this whole marketing, sales, brand thing, it needs to come together more, and it can't be done in a silo of one versus the other.
Yeah, and the bottom of the funnel activations are so enticing because of the greater data, the easier to show that ROI, and so it's sort of continuous pull down toward the bottom of the funnel. But to your point, right, if you're ignoring the top of the funnel, it's a short term strategy. Is my fear, and so let's keep going down that path, because I do
Mm-hmm.
think it's interesting that you were very early, to my view, in having this sort of full funnel responsibility. And in the way you talked in our pre-call, you're really describing Amazon as a marketing channel as much as a
Mm-hmm.
retailer selling your products, which is a long-term mega trend that I think is absolutely on point. And one of the big things we're sort of grappling with in the marketing industry. Did you consciously or purposefully see it that way, or was that just the instinctive expression of a trained marketer thrust into this responsibility for e-commerce?
I think it certainly wasn't, conscious. I think it evolved over time. And I think it's one of those things, again, kind of thinking about it from a sales standpoint of, if you have a, let's just kind of say a bucket of business or a market, and you need to, you have two choices: either grab more share or grow the pie, or both. Well, so what's the best way to do it? So, in this environment of retailer media, and again, whether it's Amazon Media, Walmart, Rondell, whoever, you get a lot more information and you have a lot more understanding of how people are searching and how people are looking at things. So you have that opportunity to grow the pie. But if you're doing that without also gaining share, you're creating opportunities for other people to win sales based on your investment of growing the pie. So you have to look at it from both a hey, what am I doing with off platform? What am I doing with different things from a DSP, to also making sure that, okay, when you're pulling people in from the DSP to Amazon, that you have the right, your right content, your right videos, your right, your attribution at sponsored products, sponsored brands, to basically almost convert what you're already invested in.
Mm.
So that's where, one of the things that I'm very interested in is really understanding and how do we better use the Amazon Marketing Cloud, the AMC, is like, where is that attribution coming from? Are people going right from DSP right to the product detail page to buying the product? Are people seeing, hey, I want a command hook, or I want a furnace filter, or I want something, or it's it's wildfire season, or the Canadian smoke is coming down from, and the air quality is bad. I should look at a new room air purifier or something like this. How do they go from that realization and that initial search, whether it's on, Amazon, Walmart, Target, wherever, to making that decision of what to buy? And I think that's where it's so interesting right now, is that the data all is there. We as marketers probably just haven't built out the framework to fully understand it yet enough to make better decisions. And I think using AMC, and some of the work that we were starting on with our partners at Flywheel, to understand some of that, along with the Amazon advertising team, really helped from that standpoint.
That's great. I think one of the things you mentioned too in the in our initial pre-call was that there are these format restrictions that come naturally with working through a retailer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something we've sort of long wrestled with at gen.video, was the idea that, look, a retailer exists to do one thing. They exist to sell products, right? And so whatever content you're creating, whatever marketing you're trying to do within those confines, it's going to exist within not only some pretty strict restrictions of
Mm-hmm.
what you can do, how you can get them the content, but it's also going to be very heterogeneous. In other words, what you can do on Amazon is not going to be the same thing that you can do on Walmart, not going to be the same thing that you can do on Target, which is completely different from how marketing messages have worked for the last 100
Right.
years. TV, magazine, newspaper, radio, they existed to run ads. And so they had a vested interest in this homogenous environment. And so, if you showed up with money in a commercial, they'd figure out how to run it. It's completely different
Mm-hmm.
in retail media and the broader e-commerce platforms. But within those restrictions, I suppose maybe it turns out that that's almost freeing. We have to do it this way, and therefore, but the trade-off is we get these ridiculous insights. And so I'm sort of curious, do you feel like the world has come around to saying, like, okay, yes, I'll make that trade-off? Or are we still in a world where marketers or let's just say brands more generally are fighting those restrictions and not taking advantage of the insights? Where do you, one,
I think,
am I correct in the way I've set it up? And two, where are we in that evolution?
first of all, I think, yeah, every marketplace or every space is slightly different. But it's also slightly different because their consumer searches for things differently or shops differently.
Hmm.
I think, some of the insights that we've had is that, you know, how somebody shops on Amazon, they might not use the same terminology at Walmart. So, and they might be looking for something in a framework that's slightly different, or, basically maybe a regional nuance of terminology or something along that lines. So I think the real thing from a marketing standpoint is, how do you create content that can be used by your specific e-commerce brand teams and be modified the way it needs to be done? So let's say, hey, you're going to have, maybe the brand team puts together really nice images of the products. They put together some really nice images of people using the product, some of those types of things. But then each individual team, whether it's the Amazon, Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever, has the ability to either put, content over it, or to modify it, or use it in such a way that makes sense for that retailer market. So you're taking advantage of the big brand part of it, but then you're nuancing it. Very similar, I mean, going back to the old days where you'd have a product and, okay, you'd have an end cap, but maybe the you say, hey, we have a summer end cap of XYZ product. Maybe the end cap display portion was the same, but the header on it was different by Kroger versus Walmart versus whatever. So again, it's how do you use that same framework to save the money, save the time, to basically be more nuanced for the audience that is on that platform.
You gave a couple of examples in the pre-call. I'd love for you to share, with the audience those two, because I think they really kind of bring home this point of being aware of the environment and adapting to the environment. The one was around ceramic car wax, and the other
Hmm.
was around furnace filters and Saturday mornings.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I just
So
want to cue you in, but yeah, tell us about those two examples. They were
yes.
fascinating.
So one of the brands that 3M owns is McGuire's, and one of the things that I took over that business, it was 18 months or so ago, and they had a terrific product coming out, and it was working really well in the brick and mortar, auto zones and all those types of places. It was a ceramic car wax, and now you see ceramic car wax technologies in a lot of different places. But the bidding was, so they were bidding on the term ceramic car wax because that's what was important, was the term ceramic. But if you actually look at how people search, they search for car wax. They don't, nobody, I mean, even if people knew about ceramic car wax, they didn't bid on nobody searched for ceramic car wax. So, the key was, and again, it was just one of these nuances of, like, say, hey, let's make sure we're winning on the term car wax before we're worrying about winning on the term ceramic car wax, which goes against everything that the brand people would want you to do because their baby is the ceramic car wax. But on the Amazon platform, you can't win on ceramic car wax until you're winning on the term car wax. So you have to win on those terms that are important because there are certain things too that you can go down the path of using like a long tail keyword search using like a Profitero tool or something like that. At the end of the day, you have to win on the top keywords just as much as you have to win on the long tail, from that standpoint. So I thought that was interesting, and I think the other thing is really understanding when your consumer shops and when you should be investing the money. So we were working with our partners at Flywheel, and they did a nice analysis and realized that most of our click and conversion was occurring on Saturday morning between 9 and 3, or Sundays. Basically on furnace filters, it was definitely more of a Friday, Saturday, Sunday thing than a Wednesday night thing. So making sure that you're winning your search when people are searching. I mean, winning search when nobody's searching is just a waste of money. So, making sure that when your customers are searching and shopping, so that way you have a budget set up for the right time is I think key, especially in this market. I mean, you don't run beer ads on Tuesday afternoons. You run beer ads during sporting events, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, it's a very similar type of thing.
And can we bring it back just quickly to influencers? What role did you all see influencers playing through this? You mentioned social being sort of more of a top of the funnel type of activity, which I agree with. It's gen.video. We love to say it does. It can be something that pulls from top of the funnel down through the funnel, even to bottom funnel. How did you
Mhm.
guys think about that? And again, thinking about knowing your consumer, one of the things I love about influencers, I feel like they do a great job translating between brand promise and key selling points in brand speak and then putting it into consumer speak. But what did you all find with influencers?
I think you kind of hit the point. It's like sometimes you get caught up as a company, you get caught up in your own features and benefits versus what the everyday consumer, how they talk, how they look at the product, how they use the product. And I think the influencers do a great job of not only helping bridge that between corporate speak and consumer speak, but I also think that they bring different ideas. So I've
Mm.
of like how should that product be presented to their audience? Because I think that's the one thing that influencers are very good at it, is they know who their group is. They might, it might be an influencer that only has 25, 30,000 people, or it might be somebody that has 1 million, but they know who those people are and they know how to reach those people. And so, as a brand, listening to how those influencers talk to their audience is very important because you might have to change your pitch to each of those influencers to hit those audiences. Again, I think we're getting into this world of personalization more and more. And so the more you can have that flexibility to be able to say this versus that, I think you're going to be far more effective in reaching your audience.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's exactly right. I think it's a great shortcut to getting to know an important part of your audience when you've picked the right influencers to work with, and listening to the language they use. So thank you for that. All right, well, this has been amazing. I like to close these things out with something fun, and
Hmm.
today I thought we could go back to something I've done in the past, which is usually worked really, really well, which is comparing our mutual contacts on LinkedIn. And
Okay.
so it's a pretty august group here. We've got Danny Silverman, Lauren Goot, James Seidel, Melissa Burdick, speaking of retail media, Megan
Hmm.
Harbold, Alex
Hmm.
McCord, speaking of
Yeah.
Flywheel,
Yeah.
David Hang, Laura Gustafson, which is a former guest on Generation Influence and one of my favorite people ever, and finally, Alex Jude. So there's definitely an e-commerce theme here.
Hmm.
We've got the essential sub theme. We've got a pack view sub theme. We've got some shopper marketing. We've got some UGC. Of this list, now that I've given you a second to think through it, pick
Hmm.
someone who you haven't talked to in a while who made a big impression on you and tell us what that big impression was. We'll shout them out and we'll let them know how impactful they were for you.
I'll have to go with Alex just because, it was one of these things when 6 years ago, when I was kind of getting into this first role at Amazon, I sat down with Alex and Patrick from Flywheel, and I really didn't know what I got myself into. But, you know, it's one of those things where I think they both kind of like said, "Hey, you know what? He must be a pretty decent person. Let's help him." And I think, Alex, I have not been able. I saw him at the Cleveland Research seminar back in San Diego back in October.
Hmm.
We had dinner, but I have not had a chance to talk to him since. But just a very very good group of people, and I appreciate all of them that we just mentioned because they're the people that make this job fun. We all have a passion for the industry. We all have a passion for our businesses, and anytime we can get together and have conversations about anything, it's absolutely awesome.
That's great. I actually just met Alex, and so he's wicked smart, as we say here in Boston. And so
Hmm.
it'll be really fun to shout him out and all these people. It is, as you say, it's a great list. And the thing that when I do this, it makes you realize how small the world is, and to your point, how many great people are moving the industry forward. So thank you for that. Thank you for all your insights, Scott. And thank you, everybody listening, for tuning into the podcast. We will see you next time on Generation Influence. Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. New episodes of Generation Influence drop every Wednesday, so be sure to check us out and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. You can find information on next week's guest in the description below. Hope to see you then and there.